Welcome to Whistle Talks, episode 10. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us. Before we get started, I would like to talk about your background and how you got into the industry of AI. I know you are the CEO and co-founder of Air Traffic Control. So get into that industry and a little bit about your journey so far.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's it's a nice kind of uneven, irrational path, I suppose, which everybody's is at this point, I think, to AI and how cool to be the first double-digit guest on Whistle Talk. So I'm all about it. That's great. All right, so um, this really kind of stemmed, and it always has, out of some lived experience, always kind of related to the idea of content. So early in my career, I was a BDR, making phone calls, sending emails, trying to get meetings booked for the AEs that I worked for, which you guys at Whistle know all about.
That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. It's the engine. You guys are the engine there, for so many lucky businesses. And so, I would do the standard things, and you make the phone calls and try to get people on the phone, and you'd be given these scripts, and they would kind of work sometimes. But if you were going to blow it out of the water, you had to do something better, smarter. And I worked for a business back in the day called Corporate Executive, where that had a ton of content. That's really what we did, is we built best practices for C-level executives in various functions, right? So a program for CIOs and CFOs, general counsels, what have you. This was before anything like gating or web accessibility. Our content was literally in books. And the way that our customers would access those insights that we were building for them, like our core value, was by subscribing and getting that book. And a sales rep would go on the road with this big bag full of books, and then they would open one of these books during the course of a meeting and say, "Isn't that incredible?" And they go, "Yeah, it's great." And you go, "If you sign up, I could just leave this one here." Right. And that was kind of the tease. It was very content driven. And what I started to do was photocopy pages out of those books and then fax them to these executives back when faxing was a thing. And I'd follow that up with an email and a phone call. And I would just blow my meeting numbers out of the water. Right. It was all value based. It was give first. And I got some really dirty looks from leadership who said, "You're giving the product away." And I said, "Well, also, I've created more pipeline than any other rep in history. So what do you want to do?" And they said, "Maybe you're onto something." But the problem was that just didn't scale very well. And so all throughout my career, I continued to have, increasingly more senior kind of revenue, and then marketing, and then also product leadership positions at various companies, Nielsen and WPP, and these other really exciting spots. But always trying to come up with a value add with content, with things that we could share. And in 2011, started getting really excited about what content could do for higher education as an industry. Built a company called Quadrangle. And what we started to stumble on back then were some of the early capabilities of IBM Watson, and starting to think about the earliest days of natural language processing, and what could we do with that in order to connect content between an institution and an alum or a student, or any other kind of a supporter of a higher ed institution. And we came up with some really cool tech. We're buried in trying to sell into higher education. It was really brutal, but we built this really amazing engine, sold that in 2018. I took some corporate therapy for a couple of years, and then got back on the horse a couple of years ago with air traffic control to say, all right, can we take this idea of connecting content at the human level, between them and an organization, and what could we do with AI in order to do that? So I've been kind of meandering through advanced content marketing use cases pretty much my entire career, just wearing lots of different named hats, but it was really always about trying to get content in front of people. And it just so turns out that AI and initially natural language processing are both uniquely really, really good at sifting through that unstructured volume of information and doing some pretty cool things. So that's how I've gotten to where I am now.
Wow, that is really, really interesting. I Love that you mentioned your background of, starting off as a BDR. I think a lot of people in this industry or in the AI industry are, in that kind of position and work their way up. So you have such a good knowledge of outbound, all sorts of sales sort of techniques and that. So I really, really love that. And the topic that we're going to be speaking about today is how generative AI is ruining outbound. And before we start, we speak about outbound. Could we speak a little bit about a short description of what generative AI is?
Yeah, sure. Well, it depends on who you ask, I suppose. But generative AI, really what it's doing is it's taking some series of inputs and coming up with a next best guess as to what will most naturally appear after the thing you just saw, which sounds bizarre. But basically, if you're asking ChatGPT a question, what it's doing is it's looking at the entirety of knowledge as it's been fed, which is pretty messy. It's basically consuming the internet. We all know that the internet is full of a whole bunch of horse crap, which is why we'll see a lot of issues there. But then what it's saying is, if I get a question that says, "How long is a giraffe's neck?" It's going to go and look at all the language that it has access to around giraffes. And
Yeah.
what it's first going to do is it's going to predict the first couple of words, and then it predicts the next couple of words, and then it predicts the next couple of words based on essentially all the information that it has. Now, that's the linguistic application of generative AI. It works the same way statistically, and frankly, with numerical applications, so trying to do analytics and things like that. It's actually far more controlled because there's less of an argument. The number 7 is always the number 7. But with language, that's where it really becomes incredibly difficult. And it's one of the reasons why everybody's so excited about use cases of generative AI against language.
Looking at your LinkedIn, and you posted something a week ago, which I found so funny. It was about how someone reached out to you with a message saying, "I was speaking about you at lunch and you came up 3 times." And you're like, "Don't talk nonsense. There's no way anybody's speaking about me at lunch and
Yeah.
me coming up 3 times." Like, if you're going to be giving people templates or something like that, you better personalize it better or make it not seem so AI generated.
Mhm.
So I just thought that was like a really nice way to summarize how AI is affecting outbound. Things that you've been saying about how AI is causing outbound to have less of a human sort of touch and a personalization. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think that there's a few things going on. One, I think it's important to kind of talk about the difference in what's happening in outbound. One, we obviously have tools now that allow us to kind of infinitely scale our outbound volume, right? So we can warm up dozens of email inboxes, whether they belong all to one person or to several people. It's really something that you can automate. And I don't have any problem with that. But what it does mean is that we can send lots. And the thing that's happened is, classically, what as a BDR myself, I sometimes would stumble upon a structure to an email that just got a great response rate, right? And I don't necessarily know exactly why, but it did. And then I would use it, and then I would tell all my buddies at all the desks around me, like, "Hey, here's my email template. This is killing for me." Right? And they'd go, "Awesome." And then they'd start to scale it up, and everybody would start to have a really good time. And at a certain point, it wouldn't be working very well anymore because we'd kind of all sent it to everybody and our addressable market had been covered. I think there's a couple of things happening. One, I think there are a lot of template offerings in the sales market and the outbound market. These aren't necessarily really driven by AI at all. What they are is just templates. And you have to assume that if you send someone a template, you are not the first one to send it to them, because by the time it's made its way into a product, it's already been used by a bunch of other people and it's probably already dead. So that's one of my first kind of big things around there, just to make sure that I kind of create a line between the difference between templates and where generative AI, I think, is making a different set of mistakes. On the generative AI side, the reason that I'm a bit frustrated by it is that all of this is about the quality of inputs the quality of offer, right? There is more opportunity for greater quality of planning around outbound activities than there ever has been before, because essentially you are your imagination is no longer stifled by the tools that you have available to you. It used to be I could dream up amazing things, but it might take me 4 hours by hand to write that email. Now it would work, but then I have this trade-off that every kind of inside sales organization has of I need to balance volume with quality, right? And so in comes generative AI, and we start to go, oh, I don't have to balance those things at all anymore. My volume can be infinite and my quality can be great. But the thing is, on the quality piece, is that people are really missing out on what the inputs have to be. And it's not just what am I feeding the generative AI model, but it's also what is the purpose of this outbound sequence? What's the ask? Just because I can say something that is specific and unique to Nick doesn't mean that it's going to help me schedule a meeting with him or create any sense of relevance. I got an email yesterday, day before, from somebody that said, oh, I saw that you went to the University of Arizona and there's this event in Tucson called the Tucson Rodeo. And I bet that has, clowns and bull riding and whatever. And I bet that was so cool. I hope that you got to go to that. Anyway, we do outbound services. And I thought about this, and I've got a post teed up for LinkedIn. You'll see me kind of decrying how awful I thought that was.
Can't wait.
Generative AI being used to run research against my LinkedIn profile and then creating a connection between the location of my institution of learning and an event in that place. But at no point was there any bridge of relevancy, not even something clever, right? That information is completely irrelevant to whether or not I need outbound services, right?
Exactly.
There are ways that you could establish that I need outbound services using generative AI. So what I mean by generative AI is kind of like ruining outbound is because there's just not enough planning. We're not tooling with sales enablement. We're not setting a long-term strategy. Frankly, we've got a sales enablement team that kind of sees some tools, spins some stuff up, and they go, oh, cool, this sounds like I wrote it for Kayla. But Kayla receives that email and can instantly identify it as generative AI bullshit that has nothing to do with me. Really, I know that you just scraped that information, and it certainly doesn't help me connect my needs with your offering, right? And I think that that's the place where I'm really, really starting to scream about generative AI ruining a lot of outbound. There are a handful of organizations that I've seen do some things that are really very impressive, but the planning phase was significant. Rev ops and marketing ops were involved. There was a data strategy against it, right? There was a real planning. There was testing against what the generative AI use cases might have been when those templates ended up getting written, right? And then they said, okay, let's start to test this thing and scale it up. And that's really where I think people have a real opportunity, but the data inputs are still the mandate, right? And if you don't have those, everything else is just a parlor trick and a waste of time.
It's not like you're opposed to AI at all. That's what your company does. You get people that are opposed to it, and you're so forward and you're so involved, but you're saying you have to plan it properly. You have to roll it out with intention, personalization, do the right kind of research, get everyone involved in the rollout instead of just putting in some garbage and just, kind of posting it or sending it out. And I'm sure people are, getting frustrated and becoming desensitized to AI messages, because a lot of the time when a lot of thought is put into it, it's so obvious that it's an AI message, and it's like, wow, does this person actually know what I do or what I need?
Right.
It's like a bit of a waste of time. So I think,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there are ways to scale up sensibilities of empathy. I'll give you an example. I think that look, the SDR game is hard. It's freaking hard. AE follow-up is hard. Like I don't want to crap down anybody's throat and decry like, oh, SDRs are garbage or AEs are crapola or they're doing a shitty job. What they're doing is they're chasing at something in the hopes that it's going to help them unlock And the problem is that the world has become so much more competitive at scale. I can send just as many emails today as a company with 50 times my revenue. That was never possible before. It was never possible before. But I will say the thing that is really amazing is that if a small, nimble organization is insanely empathetic and deeply thoughtful about their market, they can come up with stuff. So let me give you an example. We're creating a campaign right now where we know that one of the things that air traffic control does is it increases how many pages someone will visit on a web visit, right? If they're a returning visitor, we can personalize the content that gets served to them and cause them to consume more pages. And most marketing leaders would say, if I can cross about 2.4 pages on my average visit, I'm going to be best in class creating a bunch of pipeline, right? So we're able to take data from tools like SEMrush, and at scale, I know that you have HubSpot, which is our key integration. I know if you're above or below 2.4 average pages per visit and how far above or below, which dictates my follow-on messaging of I can help you get to 2.4 close to it overnight, or hey, you're already over 2.4. It's really tough to get incremental wins being best in class already. I have an easy incremental win for you, right? None of that is generative AI. None of that is generative AI, but it is fantastic data inputs, scaling the quality of those data inputs and being super thoughtful about why we got that data to begin with, because it deeply connects to our proposition and specifically speaks to the business that we're talking to, right? So this is one of the things where I always kind of go back. If you're not talking to your marketing ops and rev ops people, or you don't have those people as a sales organization or an SDR org, you should kind of like slow down and ask for help and look externally and get super obsessed with like, what do you do for organizations and how can you identify that you have an opportunity to serve this business against those value propositions, right? The kind of spaghetti against the wall, asking if you're relevant is insane at this point. You need to know that you're relevant and only ping the people for whom you do have strong product relevancy and make sure that they know that you know that you have strong product relevancy for them, right? And at that point, people aren't unsubscribing from those messages. They're not writing back like, how'd I get on your bullshit list? They're saying either that's really cool, I'd be interested in learning more, or they say, oh, you know, actually we're in the middle of a project or we just finished a web refresh or whatever it is. We're not really ready to think about anything new with our website, right? That's a great response. That's an excellent, timing's off, but I'll keep telling you about, you know, the other ways that we could potentially be helpful to you over time. And none of that's generative, not one bit of it, but it's hyper personalized and very relevant to the proposition and the person receiving it.
I love that so much. You're basically saying that the human touch and human expertise are not obsolete, and they're not, you know, dying with the whole progression of AI. I think people were worried about, you know, their jobs are going to become redundant or the expertise are no longer needed because of AI. But you're saying that's really not the case. We need it to work hand in hand, and that's kind of the only way we're going to progress.
I do think that that's right to a degree. Yes. I think that if you are a 50th percentile SDR, BDR, AE, or below, you're done, right? I don't need you anymore. I can automate 50th percentile or better. And I think the other thing that's evolving here too is taking your world-class AE motion, your world-class BDR and SDR motions, and turning those people really into your scientists who are experimenting on outbound motions, right? Like handwriting some of these things, seeing if people are responding, creating some structure. Back to me sitting in a cubicle 25 years ago, right? And writing emails by hand and then seeing what happened and then saying, oh, I can use some merge tags in Outlook to kind of scale this up. That really is, if I can find world-class people who are thought leaders, who understand data, who are deeply tuned in to what our product really does, which is all the way back, honestly, to some of the core propositions around account-based marketing and ABM is, can I connect product marketing, top of funnel, content marketing, my outbound team, my sales team, my post-sales experience? Can I connect all that? And I think that's what we're starting to learn, is that if we connect all those folks and all those operations, and we figure out what is truly world-class for this organization at this moment, for our market, right, then we can start to scale excellence, right? And that's what these tools allow you to do. So do I think that there's a point in time where I could look like I've got 20 BDRs and really just have one superstar or two superstars? Like, maybe. I think the teams are going to look different. But I do think it's important to kind of think about what the BDR's job is going to look like on a headcount scale perspective a year, 2 years, 3 years from now versus what it looks like now, because it will, at a minimum, be fundamentally different. And potentially the number of headcount that I'm going to need could really change. And we're already seeing this with a number of startups that are starting to scale, things that really work and are exceedingly well tested. And it's kind of like a fast is slow, slow is fast thing, right? If we get a great cadence, we can scale it because the data and the tooling is there in a way that it just wasn't before. And I think that's something that everybody should be paying attention to.
That's super interesting. Thank you for that. So at the end of the day, it's quality over quantity, like they always say.
100%.
Nick, before we close, I just wanted to speak about this quote that I found in your LinkedIn. You made a post and you said, establish relevancy first, optimize formatting second. I think that's such a cool way to sum up exactly what we spoke about today with Outbound and generative AI. And a lot of your posts are about those kinds of things, and that really resonated with me, and I think it'll resonate a lot with people. Very interesting. So Nick, thank you so much for joining Whistle Talks. It's been an honor having you, and we'd hope to get you on again.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Kayla. Have a great day.